2019 is just about to call it a year, and this year we had major announcements, openings, closures, accidents. This year was absolutely packed full of activity. For my final video of 2019, I thought that we should take a look back at the year that was for the amusement and theme park industry. Within a week of the new year, we had our first announcement, and it was a pretty big shocker. SeaWorld San Diego would be adding their third coaster over the past 3 years, this one being the biggest of them all, a B&M dive coaster called Mako. On February 3rd, we said goodbye to Scandia, Ontario, and the beloved E&F Miler coaster, the Screamer, as the park changed ownership and was shut down. February 8th was a significant day for coaster fans in Virginia. We had the sad but not entirely unexpected news that Volcano the Blast coaster would be closing and would be removed. Unfortunately, since this announcement came in February, there was no grand send-off and opportunity for everyone to get their last rides in. It had been closed for the vast majority of the 2018 season, and its maintenance just became too much of a nightmare for the park to deal with. So even though this news came as a big downer, that same day, BGW fans released the layout of Project Madrid, a new coaster coming to Busch Gardens Williamsburg for the 2020 season, and people immediately assumed that it would be an Intamin multi-launch. 2019 would be the first time that my home park of Magic Mountain would get a new coaster since I started covering this kind of thing on social media, so I was very interested on February 15th when the first supports arrived on site for West Coast racers. Sure, Carowinds would get Copperhead Strike open just 5 weeks later, but it's really not a race. The next big news to drop came on March 1st when Busch Gardens Tampa announced that Gwazi would become a hybrid. Okay, we actually knew that the day that the park announced Tigris in 2018, but March 1st was when we had confirmation that this would be the tallest, fastest, and steepest hybrid in North America, taking all of those records from Steel Vengeance. Busch Gardens didn't have to do this, but the fact that they did shows how serious the SeaWorld Entertainment Company is about making a splash in the thrill ride industry. From great news regarding an RMC hybrid to terrible news regarding an RMC hybrid, 11 days later on March 11th, strong winds at Poland's Energylandia caused the partially constructed Zadra structure to collapse onto itself. This wouldn't end up being much of an issue, but more on that later. March 23rd marked the first major coaster to open for 2019. This is Copperhead Strike at Carowinds, the mock multi-launch that was ready for the park's opening weekend. From a coaster opening to a coaster closing, that same day we got word from the Six Flags Magic Mountain communications director that Green Lantern would never reopen. It had been almost 2 years since it had last operated, but this was confirmation of the inevitable. And then that same night through the next day, Green Lantern started running test cycles for the first time in what had to be over a year. A bizarre move for a coaster that just got official word that it would be closing. But the rumor at the time is that they were testing it to show park officials from La Ronde in Montreal, which goes to show you that sometimes the rumor mill isn't always full of it. The next day, March 25th, a woman fell out of El Loco at the Adventure Dome in Las Vegas. It was later found out that she was a double amputee, but the ride would be closed until August while the investigators did their job and eventually deemed the ride safe for operation. On March 28th, the second major coaster of the year opened to the public, the first RMC in Japan, the massive Haguke at Nagashima Spaland. April 13th had two notable events. First, we got to see the first West Coast Racers track on site at Magic Mountain, and then a great news story to scare the GP happened over in New Jersey.
The two water-filled dummies like this one were put in the coaster for a routine safety check, but Hartley says the dummies had leaks that went undetected, so they lost their mass and shape. End result, the dummies flew out of the ride, the impact damaging shingles and plywood at the Ebb Tide Suites next door.
And then we had a string of pre-summer coaster openings. Tigris at Busch Gardens Tampa on April 19th, Kentucky Flyer at Kentucky Kingdom on April 28th, Yukon Striker on Canada's Wonderland's opening day on May 3rd, and Dragonflyer, along with Wildwood Grove, at Dollywood on May 10th. On May 14th, West Coast Racers finally went vertical. On May 24th, SeaWorld in Australia announced a new area called the New Atlantis, including a Gravity Group wooden coaster called Leviathan. This coaster is set to open around December of 2020. And then we had some post-Memorial Day openings. Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland opened on May 31st with required reservations to get in, and then came the 10-hour waits for Hagrid's Magical Creatures motorbike adventure at Islands of Adventure on June 13th. The Intamin Blitz coaster Taiga opened at Finnan's Linnanmaki, then Max Force at Six Flags Great America on the 4th of July, and Steel Curtain at Kennywood on July 13th. On July 14th, an accident straight out of a nightmare was captured on camera from a park in India. If you want to see what happened, click the card. Basically, the pendulum snapped in half and fell to the ground, killing 2 people and injuring many others. As the summer was drawing to an end, we started getting our announcements for 2020. Starting on July 24th with confirming the details of Hershey Park's new B&M Hyper that we knew they were getting from the previous announcement for Chocolate Town in October of 2018, but this time we learned the name, Candymonium, along with a partial POV and stats. 6 days later, on July 30th, Busch Gardens Williamsburg confirmed what we expected back in February. They would, in fact, be adding an Intamin multi-launch coaster, and it would be called Pantheon. On August 1st, Universal Studios Florida announced Epic Universe, a 750-acre park that will include shops and hotels and will be situated down the road from the current Universal Resort, opening sometime around 2023. August 14th saw the announcement of Mystic River Falls for Silver Dollar City, the raft ride with the tallest drop in the Western Hemisphere. And the next day, we finally got the grand reveal of the long-awaited Giga Coaster, Orion at Kings Island, which was disappointing for a lot of enthusiasts because they had been looking forward to a Giga Coaster at Kings Island for years and were faced with the reality that this would not be a record breaker. On August 22nd, Zadra at Poland's Energylandia opened to the public. Not only a year ahead of the original schedule, but they also pulled it off despite the structure partially collapsing in March. Zadra is considered to be a top 10 coaster in the world. That same day, there was more good news for Australia when Dreamworld announced a new Mock Rides launch coaster that would feature a spinning bat car. 2 days later, an announcement emerged that nobody saw coming. A new park in Saudi Arabia called Six Flags Qiddiya that would feature a coaster called Falcon's Flight, the world's tallest, fastest, and longest coaster with a ridiculous-looking layout that, at one point, climbs up onto a mountain and then goes down that mountain through an enormous tunnel. This was a serious, legitimate announcement, but we'll have to wait and see what this park and Falcon's Flight actually looks like when the park opens in a few years. On August 29th, we had a grand opening and a big announcement. Starting in Orlando, Florida with Disney's Hollywood Studios, Galaxy's Edge opened to the public about 3 months after the Disneyland version. This was also the same day that Jim Reed Anderson did his annual corny announcement video for the 2020 additions to all the Six Flags parks. This is where we learned all of the details about the new coaster additions like Jersey Devil at Great Adventure, Aquaman Power Wave at Over Texas, Vipera at La Ronde, which is indeed Green Lantern relocating from Magic Mountain, and Sidewinder Safari at Discovery Kingdom. Energylandia had just opened Zadra a couple weeks earlier, but they jumped back in the news on September 2nd by announcing their 2020 edition, a Vekoma Shockwave coaster that would later be named Abyssus. After opening 2 of the most anticipated coasters in 2018 with Hyperion and 2019 with Zadra, Energylandia wowed the coaster world by announcing possibly the best new coaster of 2020. The annual Golden Ticket Awards from Amusement Today were announced on September 6th, and the notable winners were Steel Curtain for Best New Ride, Phoenix for Best Wooden Coaster, Fury 325 for Best Steel Coaster, and Europa Park for the Best Park. September 12th was a huge day for the SeaWorld chain, making official 3 of their new for 2020 coasters. First off, giving us a name and details for the Hyper Hybrid coming to Busch Gardens Tampa, Iron Gwazi. We also got official confirmation of other projects that we were aware of but hadn't officially been told about yet. One being the Premier Rides shuttle launch coaster coming to SeaWorld Orlando, Icebreaker, and the other being the GCI Wooden Hybrid coaster coming to SeaWorld San Antonio, Texas Stingray. September 27th and 28th were a couple dark days for the amusement park industry. First, we learned of the closure of Vortex at Kings Island at the end of October, capping off its 33-year lifespan at the park. And then, the next day, a tragic accident occurred at Feria Chapultepec in Mexico City, where a train on the park's Schwarzkopf Looper, Chimera, derailed and killed 2 passengers. October 25th marked the long-awaited opening of Nickelodeon Universe at the American Dream Mall in New Jersey. And although they didn't have much open that first weekend, the park seems to have been steadily improving since and offers thrill seekers and families something to do year-round, especially once the water park and the aquarium open. On October 27th, Vortex gave its final rides and the park gave it a proper send-off. But when one ride dies, another is born, and 2 days later, on October 29th, S&S unveiled their Access model, a coaster that seems to have gotten a lot more attention than any other model, possibly since RMC debuted its Raptor track. And it's one of the most unique concepts ever to be introduced into the industry. On November 18th, the amusement park world gathered in Orlando for IAAPA. We saw new concepts that were introduced, and we had some train reveals for the 2020 coasters. And we learned that SeaWorld San Diego's new dive coaster would be changing its name from Mako to Emperor. And finally, on December 21st, coming in just under the gun for the new year, West Coast Racers made its long-awaited debut for Six Flags members. So that was 2019 in a nutshell. Let me know if there are any important stories that I left off here, and also tell me your favorite memory of this past year. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in 2020.